And then lastly, my top 5 most interesting books of the year, starting with S by J.J. Abrams and Doug Dorst. This is one of the first books I read this year, the very first review I ever did on this channel. I'm going to post a link to that. It's not the best review because it was the very first one I ever filmed, and it was kind of weird to do that, but I still really think you should go watch it to see a lot of my thoughts. I think a lot of people go into this book expecting something that it's not, and like I think people go in expecting some like mystery thing or something that they have to solve or something like that, and really it's just kind of this really interesting character study about these two characters who find a library book, are obsessed with kind of the things happening in the book, but also the author of the book, V.M. Straka, and the book is Ship of Theseus by V.M. Straka. V.M. Straka is a very mysterious author. The boy character in this book is a graduate student who's like obsessed with him and just is trying to learn everything he can about V.M. Straka. The girl character finds this book in the library with a bunch of notes written in it and kind of writes notes herself, and then they start writing notes back and forth to each other. And I think it's more of a love story than anything because the two of them really connect with one another through this book and through the things happening in this book and through them solving a mystery for themselves. And I think if you go in with that mindset, you'll likely really enjoy it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff just going on all at once. Like, you have to read the actual book itself, plus all of the notes on the side and the margins, and these little things that are all stuffed in here. There's a ton of little notes and newspaper clippings and a bunch of other stuff just like put in the book all throughout it, and it is a lot to pay attention to, but I think it really worked very well. I loved everything about it. I just love the way it's made as a physical object. The smell of it, it smells like an old library book. It looks like an old library book. Just the artistry of the book itself is worth noting, and the stuff inside of it is definitely on par with the way it's made. I really love the writing. I love the kind of classical writing from this fake author, V.M. Straka, in the actual Ship of Theseus story, and the writing of the two characters writing in the margins. And I love all the different stories within this one book, all the different things going on at the same time. This was like the book that I was happiest to get last Christmas, and it did not disappoint me at all. The next book is the first book I've ever read by an author that I just want to read every single book by now, and that is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. I love Kurt Vonnegut's writing. I've since read Cat's Cradle as well, and I've done a full review of that, but I've also done a kind of combination review of this with a few other books, and I'll put that link to that down below where I kind of explain what it's about. Basically, this book has to deal with time and this one character that kind of skips through time. Every time he wakes up, he's in a different time of his life. He never knows what he's gonna wake up to the next day. This character was in the war, kind of like Kurt Vonnegut actually was. He's there for the bombing of Dresden, kind of like Kurt Vonnegut was. It feels very personal to Kurt Vonnegut, and it explores a whole lot of different themes and ideas about time and about war. It's got this really great dry humor that I love, and ever since I read this, I've just wanted to pick up everything Kurt Vonnegut has written and read it all. The next book I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to put in, but I decided that I was going to because it is definitely a very, very interesting book, and that is The Stranger by Albert Camus. I'm pretty sure I'm saying that right, finally. I haven't said it right at all ever since I've started mentioning it in my videos. But this one is just so weird. The perspective that you read from is just so disconnected from everything. He doesn't really care what happens to him. He doesn't really live. He just kind of observes things and doesn't really react to anything in a way that you would expect a person to react to stuff. It's very disconcerting. It's very discomforting a lot of the time to read, which is one of the things I found to be the most interesting about it, and I really loved the ending. I don't really want to say too much about it. This is one book specifically, that, not just because it's so short, but that's a part of it, that I really feel like I need to reread really soon to get a better grasp on what it was trying to do. Reading the ending makes me feel like there was things that I missed earlier on in the book that I need to go back and read, things that I need to pick up on throughout the whole book that'll really make my understanding of it better, hopefully help me to appreciate it more. But I definitely found this to be one of the most interesting books that I picked up this year, and I really think this is one that I really need to reread. It's definitely not one of my favorite things that I've necessarily read the whole year, but as far as most interesting goes, it definitely definitely fits into that. The next book is House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. This book is, if I did choose a top 5, like just from any of the books that I've read, this would probably be in it. The full review I did of this is probably one of my favorite reviews I've ever filmed. I think it's one of the best reviews I've done. There's just so much going on in this book. It's really hard to summarize it and to kind of give coherent thoughts on it, and I feel like I did a pretty good job of that in my review. Basically, it just has a story within a story within a story. There's this manuscript called House of Leaves about this film that doesn't exist called the Navidson Report. The manuscript is found by a guy who is kind of reading the manuscript and giving us some notes on it, and we kind of get glimpses into this guy's life, the guy who found the manuscript, and then we get glimpses into the guy who wrote the manuscript's life, and then the actual manuscript itself, we read it and we see a look into this film that doesn't exist called the Navidson Report and all of the stuff surrounding that film. And while it does kind of read sometimes like a textbook, I felt like those parts kind of made it even more interesting because of everything else in the book. We get these really weird, really analytical, textbooky kind of parts, and then we also get these really great, really fast-paced, really weird sections where you have to like flip through everything really fast because there's just like hardly anything happening on a page. This is another one that I just feel like I really need to reread. I mean, I already enjoyed it a whole freaking lot the first time I read it. Like I said, easily one of my top books of the entire year. But to read it again, I think I would get even a better understanding of it. And I just think it's so ambitious and has so much in it that's worth reading about. It has just a ton of ideas. It's written really well. It's written in a bunch of different styles really well. The story within a story within a story sounds like it's kind of complicated, but at the same time it's not that complicated when you're actually reading it. You get a really good understanding of what's going on. Basically, if you really want to know what this book is about and every single thing I thought about it as soon as I was done reading it, go watch my review because it goes pretty in depth into all of that. And the last book is Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. This one is probably the most difficult book I read all year. Way more difficult than House of Leaves, way more difficult than anything else, just because of how dense it is. It's so dense. There is a ridiculous amount of ideas in this, a ridiculous amount of writing. Like, it's over 1,000 pages long, but then the writing is just also really small, and the paragraphs are crazy long. There's paragraphs in here that last for pages and pages and pages, and the whole like last 200 pages of the book are footnotes or endnotes, I guess. Like, you would read throughout the book, and there's endnotes everywhere, and then you have to flip constantly to the back book to read endnotes. Some of the endnotes would go on for pages and pages and pages, just be paragraphs long, tons of writing, very dense, so much to read, so much to take in, and not only is the writing dense, but the ideas are dense. And just overall, it's a difficult book to read. If you start to read it, you realize pretty quickly how long it's going to take you to read it and how dense it is as a whole. But it is very worth it, I think, to get to the end, to finish it, to get everything that it's trying to say. I think it makes it worth it. This is another one that I did a full review for. That's probably not the greatest review to watch, just because I had to cut it so many times. I had to put so many little cuts in it because the review that I filmed for this book was like 40 minutes long, and I had to cut a ton of stuff out, and it was a very difficult review to make, but I still think everything I said in that review really just says a lot about what the book is about and what I thought about it and how it made me feel, my like immediate thoughts about it. At the very base level, this book is about this film that this character, the main character, he's at this tennis academy that was founded by his father, and his father was also a filmmaker. His father made this film that when you watch it, you become obsessed with watching it. You literally do nothing else but watch this film until you die. And people die whenever they watch it because they don't want to ever do anything else but watch it. And basically, surrounding that idea, the book itself deals with addiction and like Alcoholics Anonymous. We follow characters at this place where people are there for that. We follow a character that is a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. We follow these characters that are really addicted to things, these characters that are trying to find the film and use it against people. We have this kid who is the son of the father. We see his life at tennis academy. we just see so much of a ton of different stuff, a ton of different ideas. We do actually get to see what the film is, and I just think it works really well. It's really difficult to put a coherent thought together about this book right now, just because there's just so much to talk about, but seriously, know what you're going into before you go into it. Go watch my review. Know that it is a very difficult book to read. It is difficult to get through just because of how much is in it, but like I said, it is worth the while, and it is most definitely one of the most interesting books that I read all year. Probably one of the most interesting books that I'll read in a very long time. 2014 was a great year for reading for me. I read so many amazing books this year, and I really hope you'll think about picking up some of these if you have not already. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you very soon with more.